Hi, this is Brian Millikin, and you are listening to Chasing Dreams with Aimee J.
Welcome to Chasing Dreams podcast with Aimee J. Aimee believes that realizing a life without regrets is achieved by taking chances, chasing your dreams, making moves, and overcoming your doubts. The Chasing Dreams podcast will help you overcome life's obstacles, believe in your potential, and inspire you to face your fears. And now here's the woman who is passionately pursuing her dreams, Aimee J.
Hey Dream Chasers, this is Aimee J, and thank you so much for tuning in to the show and what is an exciting episode number 50 of Chasing Dreams. I can't believe we're here. It's mind-blowing. Half centennial, 50, whole numbers. I can't believe it. Very exciting, and I couldn't be here if it wasn't for people like you who are listening and for the wonderful guests I have, including my guest today, who is a friend and writer. His name is Brian Millikin. He was most recently a writer and consulting producer on the hit sci-fi series Haven, as most of you know, my favorite show, based on the book by Stephen King. Brian was on Haven for the entire 6 years run of the series from the very beginning. He's a native of Richmond, Virginia, and he attended UNC-Chapel Hill, and he's a big fan of the sports team there, I believe. Brian, thank you for coming on this special episode.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Thrilled to be here.
Yeah, very exciting. And you're from the DMV, which is also very cool.
That is true. I'm from the RVA, as we call it, Richmond, Virginia. But, what is it, 90 minutes from Washington, D.C.?
Yeah.
I loved it. It was 90 minutes from the beach, 90 minutes from the mountains. We were like 90 minutes from all the places you'd want to be. Mm-hmm. But as it turns out, that was the place where I was supposed to be. But I love Richmond. I love the Mid-Atlantic coast. I live in Los Angeles now, and I miss that area of the country more than anything.
Now, while you were in our area of the country, right, because now you're kind of in that Hollywood-y area, we're not really known on the East Coast for writing or television writing, movie writing. Did you have that in you from the beginning, or did it kind of develop?
Very much so. From the beginning, I guess. I'm from the suburbs of Richmond, Virginia, so I can never claim, and nor would I, to have had a rough and tumble upbringing. I'm from as suburbia as you could imagine.
Little Pleasantville?
That's right. That's right. The new subdevelopments where there's eerily no trees because, they just built it and the houses sort of rise like skeletons coming out of the ground. And, there's just every house that looks exactly the same, just different colored shutters.
Yep.
But I can't complain. And I had all the support from my parents, that I ever could have needed, so I had it lucky. But what happened really was, I think it was third grade, there was a contest. I think this still exists. It was in my county, Henrico County, and it was, I think also statewide and maybe, multiple different states. It was called Young Authors, and everyone in school was forced to participate. Everyone had to write and illustrate their own 10, 12-page little book. This is on, of course, grade school paper, that extra wide stuff you use before you even get to standard rule paper. My book was called The Wish Machine. I don't know if I ripped off an episode of The Twilight Zone or something that I was watching at the time, but I wrote a book about a kid who gets a wish machine, and then he wishes for a new bike, and he gets a bike, and then he wishes for $1 million quarters because he wants to go to an arcade, and $1 million quarters show up. But the problem is then he finds out the next day that all this money disappeared from a local bank, and so he realizes that it's didn't just come out of thin air. Whatever he wished for, he's taking it from somebody else. So he destroys the machine and he gives the money back, and no one is the wiser. And in the end, he announces that he's going to make a homework machine. The end. Let me tell you, it was pretty great book.
I gotta say, for third grade, that's very detailed.
Well, I was already at the time. What was I? I guess that would have been 10 years old. I watched pretty much everything to a fault. My parents, God bless them, let me watch whatever I wanted to, and it was usually what like my older brother was watching or what my parents were watching. I got in trouble when I was, I think, like 6. It was first grade for bringing in a copy of Stand By Me to school because it was rated not R. I think it was PG-13 at the time.
Yeah, but it's 6, right?
Pretty grown-up book about kids looking for a dead body.
Right.
And it was my favorite movie at the time, and I didn't know that other parents and other kids maybe like weren't cool with that. It was tough. I brought a TV guide in once, I think second grade, and because I was so excited about Big Trouble in Little China, which was going to air that day, and I was parading around, and I guess the ad was a little
risque,
risque, and I got it taken from me, and I got in trouble. I got in trouble in school.
Wow, you were just a little rebel, weren't you?
But I didn't do anything wrong. I would never hurt anybody. I was just like a nerd who watched everything. And like I read stuff too. My mom was a big, again, Stephen King fan. So I got in trouble again years later. I remember for, carrying around It, the big hardback thing that's, looks the size of a doorstop. And it was like weighing down my backpack. And I think I had it left it on my desk. And my fourth grade teacher was like, you're not supposed to have this. And I was like, it's my favorite book. She's like, I'm going to talk to your parents. Like, clearly they're doing something wrong. But I never felt that they did. My older brother slept in front of the television, so we would just watch TV all the time. And I started sleeping in front of the TV. And my parents made a deal with me, and they said, like, listen, you can sleep wherever you want. You can do whatever you want as long as you get good grades. And I was like, copy that. So I gave up my bed when I was in first grade, and I didn't sleep in a bed again until I was in college. I slept on the floor in front of the television, then I graduated to the couch.
Really?
And I watched TV pretty much nonstop. I would come home and do my homework while watching TV, and I would sleep with the TV on. Third grade, I was so distraught before going to school that I would cry myself to sleep every night. And the only thing, literally for months and months on end, but the only thing that would like get me to calm down and would get me through the night was Tremors. I would watch the movie Tremors every night for I think about 6 months straight. I had 2 VCRs and we were constantly taping stuff, and I was illegally copying VHS tapes from Blockbuster.
The old school method with one VCR and the other VCR
exactly. Plugged into each other.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's how I got like Monster Squad and everything else. All these things. So I was already I had a voracious appetite for storytelling in that way, and then with that stupid young author's book was the first time that I think I'd ever written something myself. And I wound up like winning for the county. I somehow won some sort of award, and I think it was because it was a little pithy and my teachers liked it. But even back then, it was my third grade teacher, Miss Merriam, and I think it was my second grade teacher, Miss Patterson. They started calling me like future like novelist and like future writer, and it just sort of stuck. And then
you were absorbing everything. It sounds like from that point on and into high school and into college. So you didn't really. It sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was kind of your thing, writing?
I was like the writer guy. In fact, well, unfortunately, it was really my only thing. I, like so many other kids, was a little bullied and a little made fun of. I have only myself to blame. I also ate whatever I wanted, and let's just say I was a little on the heavy side. But
that's not on you.
And I was also very big-hearted, a little romantic. I wrote love letters to the most popular girl in school, and then everyone in school found out, and I embarrassed myself in front of everybody. And another year I had pretty much the worst, let's just say, bathroom incident you could ever possibly have in the middle of the cafeteria, again, standing up in front of the entire school. So I would say a series of unfortunate incidents, which I will not elaborate on, wound up leaving me home alone. I had pretty much no friends for a little while. And my parents, God bless them, did what I can only imagine must have been something sad for them, for 2 parents to do. But at the time, I loved it. They felt so sorry for me that I had no friends and wasn't playing sports and was just sort of wasting away on the couch. They bought a word processor. We were not quite at the place to get a computer yet. We got a Brother word processor, one of those ones with the black screens and the gold text. That's it.
Oh,
and
Yeah.
They set up a little desk for me, and they were like, "You like to write, right? Like we know you're like a writing kid. Like maybe like this will be something that can occupy your time." And it was. I started writing really terrible like fan fiction sequels to like the video games that I played at the time, like Final Fantasy VI and stuff like that. And then I wrote a Ghost Rider novel, like the
your version.
Yeah, my version. And then I wrote one based on the Gargoyles cartoon. It's one of my favorite ones from back in the 90s. And I eventually graduated to doing like original stuff. I wrote a novel called Armageddon. It was 150 pages, single spaced, size 12 font.
Wow.
It's called Armageddon. It came out I wrote it a few years before the movie Armageddon came out.
Little secret, guys. There you go. News flash.
It was about a civil war on Mars, like a Mars colony in the future. I wrote a fantasy novel, which was terrible. I got halfway through a sequel to both of those. But my point is that I started writing. I was writing like voraciously, and at the time I thought I kind of wanted to be a novelist. But it was really it was my relationship to television, particularly in like the mid to late 90s. So while I was in like middle school and high school, again, I was kind of friendless, but I became such a huge fan of The Simpsons at the time and Seinfeld that
I was going to say some great shows of the 90s.
That frankly, I kind of developed like a sense of humor and like I could finally like be self-effacing and sort of kind of learn to be a functioning adult kind of based off those shows. And at the same time, I got really into ER and the X-Files, particularly Star Trek: Next Generation, a bunch of these shows. Homicide: Life on the Street, actually, which was shot in Baltimore. I got super into these shows, and to the extent that I was so deeply emotionally invested in them. It was like the same investment that I had with my favorite books. I remember bawling uncontrollably when Sherry Stringfield left in the second season of ER. And George Clooney tells Mark, or Anthony Edwards' character, to go tell her how you feel before she gets on that train. And he runs across town, and I'm just crying uncontrollably. And then, he gets there, and he's like, "I love you." And she's like, "I love you too, but I'm leaving the show. I'm on the train. I'm already on my way out of town. It's too late." And I was devastated. But I remember that, and and a few other moments of TV shows in the 90s that each one sort of was chipping away. And then by the time Buffy the Vampire Slayer came along, which was, and probably is, my favorite show, I was in. I was like, you know what? This is what I want to do. Like, I want to write for television. I didn't want to be a novelist. I wanted to be a screenwriter and a TV writer specifically.
For me, I feel like Buffy was the first television show based off of a movie. For me, that's how I remembered it. That I thought really did it well. Yeah.
Well, I remember seeing the movie. I saw it again by myself in the movie theater back when it was probably like 91 or 92. Mm-hmm. My parents would just drop me off at the movie theater, and I would go from theater to theater, like seeing whatever I wanted. But I remember seeing it, and I didn't like it very much. I didn't respond to the tone. Paul Rubens, dying for like 30 seconds while the camera was rolling. I was like, what am I watching here? Wasn't a Rutger Hauer fan. I
enjoyed the concept, though. I
love the concept. They're right there with you. And so, but when the TV show came around, I was one of those kids who subscribed to Entertainment Weekly early on, and I'd bring it to school and, studied Ken Tucker's reviews, voraciously, and was all about the schedule. Back in the day, the newspapers in the 90s, before the internet really.
When they wrote it.
You would get that section every Sunday, the green section or whatever they would call it, that would have the whole TV schedule for the rest of the week, printed out in big, double-wide paper, as a pull-out section in your newspaper. That thing was like my holy grail. That would come every week, and I would bust out like the highlighter and the pens, and I was like getting it going, and I was super excited. This is before DVRs, before, we had cable, what is it, like digital cable guides?
It was also before the set timers and stuff. You kind of had to be there to hit record. And,
you couldn't just sit on, only fools turned to the TV guide channel or the preview guide channel and sat there and waited for that scroll to come through and tell you what was on. If you had that thing, you were unlocked. So I was always ready. And I remember reading about Buffy when it came out, and I was like, I'm not going to watch this show. I didn't like the movie. I finally caught an episode almost by accident. It was season 3.
I was going to say, so you did hold out.
It was, I want to say it was probably episode 20 out of 22 in season 3. It was called The Prom, if you remember.
Oh, classic episode.
I had never seen it before. I remember I finally decided to check out Buffy because I had read about a new show that was going to be on the fall. It was called Angel. It was a spinoff of Buffy. Mm-hmm. And I was so taken with the concept of the vampire with a soul who was going to start his own detective agency in Los Angeles. I was like, I love this show. I'm going to watch it. Like, I'm super in. I guess I need to see an episode of Buffy first to try to get my bearings. So I tuned into The Prom. I'd never seen the show before. Familiar enough with the concept. And then by the end, if you remember, spoiler alert for a show that aired 20 years ago, Buffy has, inexplicably, because it was played by Sarah Michelle Gellar, had also been an outcast, kind of like myself or like so many of us in high school. No one, really got close to her. No one really knew her. She kind of walled herself off, in a way that's usually so often in those situations. We are the architects of our own isolation. And, she just had kind of never really been maybe appreciated by the other kids in school. Maybe they didn't know what she was doing for them, saving really the world, saving their lives over and over again. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. It was never really clear. And in that prom episode at the end, Danny Strong gets up on stage and he's like, we're going to give out a special award. We've never given out before. And he gives a little speech about how, like, none of us know you. None of us, really took the time to get to know you. But we all know that, like, it's a weird town, and maybe like we wouldn't be alive anymore if it wasn't for you. And so they give her a little umbrella that says "Class Protector," and she comes up on stage to receive it, and it was super moving. I'm in tears. I've never seen the show before. I lose it. I'm already just a wreck. And then Angel comes, and earlier in the episode, it's the prom. Buffy's never been to the prom. She just wants Angel to take her, but Angel breaks up with her in this episode. He says, I've got my own show this fall. I have to go to Los Angeles. I have to leave. Like, and also your mom came and told me that I'm no good for you. Kind of like Twilight would later trade on. Like, I'm not going to grow up. I'm not going to change. Like, but you're going to grow. You're going to become a different person. Like, we shouldn't be together. And so because he loves her, he breaks up with her. And so she's not going to have a date to the prom. And so she was distraught. And who should walk in at the end but Angel? He comes in and he says, this doesn't change anything. And she's like, I know. And then they dance, and that's the end of the episode. And I was like, first of all, it took me like hours to put myself back together again. And then I immediately became the biggest fan of the show. I sought out every episode. I caught up over the summer, and it became sort of my guiding light. And for me, it married sort of my interest in genre material. I've been one of those people, and my interest in soap operas. I grew up also on like All My Children and stuff like that, and that show kind of married it together in a way that nothing else really had at that point in time. And I just loved it.
See, guys, even guys enjoy soap operas.
Absolutely. I'm a big softie. I don't know if it was because of my upbringing or what, but for me, the only storytelling I'm really interested in is sort of character first, like emotion first. And you need sort of a relatable conflict, a relatable sort of dilemma. Whatever it is, it needs to be something that you feel. And once that happens, then you can almost get away, I think, with any kind of story, any kind of setting, like anywhere, the farthest reaches of space, or about kids in high school. It doesn't really matter. But as long as you empathize with the characters, like, that's all that matters. And that's frankly why I'm interested in it at all, in the whole writing biz.
So, real quick, fun fact, guys, Danny Strong from Buffy, who Brian just mentioned, was also a screenwriter for a number of popular movies: Butler, Mockingjay, Hunger Games, Part 1, Part 2.
And now he is on Empire.
Yes.
He co-created Empire.
Right? So, apparently you could be a writer from a number of different things, but you went to college.
That's correct.
And did you focus on writing there?
I did. Well, both my parents and my older brother had gone to University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill also. So I already had like an inroad there.
So it's in the blood.
That's correct. I was born and raised. But I got excited about going and really wanted to go, despite my whole family having gone there, because they had just started a screenwriting program there. And at the time growing up, and I had begun to look at colleges like NYU or even like, Boston, forget like USC or UCLA out here, they were all way out of my price range. That was never going to happen. But UNC, was a great deal. Public school, good place, good people, and for whatever reason, a school in in the heart of North Carolina had started a screenwriting program. And the reason why, as it turned out, was that they had one very influential and very frankly philanthropic alumni named Michael Piller, who was himself a very successful television writer. That's also a screenwriter. His big claim to fame had been he took over Star Trek: The Next Generation at the very end of season 3, or over the course of season 3. That show had sort of gone through a ton of changes and creative upheaval, and almost didn't make it after 2 seasons and then 3 seasons of just sort of looking for itself. Michael took over the show in season 3, decided, kind of revolutionary at the time, to make the show about the characters, and he sort of announced, however we got here, it doesn't matter anymore. From this point forward, we're not going to have an episode of the show that isn't about one of our main characters. And then we're going to just figure out whatever problem of the week, whatever planet, whatever issue is going on, it has to be in service of whatever issue our characters are already dealing with. It's going to either force them to confront that problem or put them in a situation where they, have to deal with it in a way that they never would have expected or anticipated, and they're going to come out the other side. And that transformed the show. He wrote, just on a long weekend, he went home and wrote the season 3 finale. It was called The Best of Both Worlds, Part 1, where Captain Picard is assimilated by the Borg. And if you watched it, you know that's sort of the, kind of a high watermark for the show, and for kind of, I guess, cliffhanger.
Pivotal episode, and mark in Picard's life. Yeah.
And at the time, they didn't know if the show was going to live or die. But that episode did so well, and it had such buzz, even though they had no idea how they were going to, come back and do another season, that the show came back, and Michael was sort of then firmly put in charge of the show. And the rest is history. From that point on, the show was great. It became the first syndicated show to be nominated for Best Emmy Dramatic Series Award. He co-created Deep Space Nine. He co-created Voyager. Then he left space and co-created with his son The Dead Zone. But he was a big, proud UNC alumni, and then at the time, I think it was 99 or 2000, donated $1 million to UNC to start a screenwriting program there. And so I went to UNC and was in the first class, the first sort of run through his screenwriting program. So I took a bunch of classes, and I loved it. It was sort of, I probably would have pursued this as a career were it not for that, but I was fortunate enough to go to a school that had a program there for me.
So a screenwriting program, you learn different things, right? Is it similar? I'm familiar with science programs because that was my background.
Congratulations.
And we did internships during the summer and things like that. Did you guys have the opportunity to do writing internships?
Well, first of all, it sounds like you had a real major, and it might have actually prepared you for the real world. Mine was a fake major.
No, it's not a fake major.
Well, technically, I was a communication studies, media studies and production major, and then I was a minor in screenwriting. They now, I think, have a major there. But so they did sort of, there's a lot of film theory and that sort of stuff, kind of media criticism sort of stuff that I did. I'm sure there are more actual, writing courses now. There was only a few at the time. I took, my senior year, I was a year-long course, which was terrific. My professor's name was David Sontag. He was a former writer and an executive even at CBS for a time. And all you did in that class was, I think, 6 or 7 of us, we wrote a feature script. So, it's about 120 pages in the first semester. And then the second semester, you rewrote the whole thing. And the whole time you're workshopping the script and scenes with everybody. And at the end of the class, you have a staged reading of the script. And it was terrific. It was a great experience, really, throughout. I had really one regret through the whole process, was that there was not a single class at the time that had anything to do with television. Back then, and it's changed a little bit since then, there was still this sort of sense amongst screenwriting, professors and even professionals that, to write movies, to write features, to write film is the top. And if you can't do that, or if you need to pay the bills, then I guess you can slum it a little bit in television. And for me, that was never the case. For me, TV was where my heart was. Since this was just on the dawn, I guess, of the golden age of TV, I can only assume that it's changed since then. But the one thing that I'm forever grateful to that whole program for and my university did it, and I'm sure other universities do too, was there is an internship program, like you asked, typically for graduated seniors, sometimes juniors at UNC. They would, if you could apply and get in, about 15, maybe 20 students a year, they hook you up with an internship out here in Los Angeles, which unfortunately, if you want to write for television in particular, and probably film also, and particularly writing or acting or directing, you really have no choice but to move to Los Angeles. There's a good amount of work being done in Toronto and Vancouver and New York, so you could probably get away with it there. But if you want to give yourself the best shot, you got to come to Los Angeles. If you're a crew person and you're interested in any of the, it's called below the line stuff, like if you're interested in set decoration or being camera guy or girl or anything, there's a lot of different places now. Georgia's huge and Louisiana's huge, places where you can work, Chicago. But if you wanted to write, act, or direct, you kind of had to come to Los Angeles. So the UNC program had internships in Los Angeles. And there was a few different ones, one at like a VFX house, one at like a camera house, and one I think at USA Network. There was one at King of the Hill, actually, which I've been kind of looking at, although I wasn't really a comedy guy. There was one internship at The Dead Zone. At the time, it was a series on USA Network starring Anthony Michael Hall. It was co-created by Michael Piller, again, and his son Sean Piller. And it was their company, Piller Squared, and their business partner, Lloyd Segan. So I kind of really kissed all the rear ends that I could at school and wound up getting that very internship that I wanted. So this was back in 2004. I graduated college, and then 1 week later, I came out here to Los Angeles, and I've been here ever since. I haven't gone back home for more than a week, I think, maybe less, since then. What was that, 12 years ago?
So would you say the rest is history?
The rest is history. I would. I was super lucky. They were good people to work for, the Pillars. I got hired out of that internship to be Michael Pillar's assistant about 6 or 7 weeks into the internship. And again, it was a lesson in, well, first of all, humility. It's always important, but just trying to make yourself useful. I had a lot of good mentors, other assistants who were there who kind of took me under the wing. And, it's the same as any other business anywhere. No matter what you want to do or where you work, the job is really just about making yourself essential. You want to make it, even if you're just an intern, and all I was doing was stocking the fridge. I would pick up trash in the parking lot, and I would go on delivery runs, and a few things like that, filing and all that sort of stuff. I was a gopher. But little by little, if you do those things well, then they start giving you other responsibilities. And the goal is just, you don't want the people who you're working for to be able to imagine what it would be like when you don't work there anymore. I think that worked out well enough for me that after 6 weeks or so, there was an opening. His assistant was going to leave, and they liked me enough, and I was plucky enough and willing to kind of blue collar my way through whatever we needed to do, I suppose, that they said, even though I was wildly underqualified for the job, they would stick on for a little while longer, train me to do the job so that I could take over. So that's where I wound up. I became Michael's executive assistant. I worked for him for 2 years or so until he passed away, actually. And then I worked for his company, kind of lived on. Sean Piller and Lloyd Segan were still both principals in their company. Later, Scott Shepard joined. They wound up producing the show Haven that I went on to work on. So it all kind of came around full circle for me. So I can't really complain. I at times, I wanted to look and try to move elsewhere, try to broaden my horizons. I was going to work for another place, but I was always really happy there. They took great care of me. I had good people to work for, and I was learning a lot. My goal, I think, had been to go to grad school. I still at the time had thought I'm going to go to UCLA graduate school to get my graduate degree in screenwriting, and or USC Film School or AFI. I wanted to kind of just make it official, but I never did. I had a job the whole time, so it helped because I was paying the bills. But I was also learning so much on the job because while I was there, that production company I worked for produced 3 more seasons of The Dead Zone. They did 4 seasons of a show called Wildfire on ABC Family. We had a few pilots other places, and then we did 3 seasons of a show called Greek, also on ABC Family. So while I was there, we did, over 100 episodes of TV, and I was involved at every step. I read every pitch, every outline, every script. I was the person taking notes and all the notes calls with the network and everything. So I had a front row seat to, I guess, how the sausage is made.
I mean, because you saw from beginning to end. I mean, you've seen all of it, because in previous conversations we've talked about how you were in the room with the creators of Haven.
That's right.
You were in the room with the creators of Haven, right? Kind of helping them as well.
So those guys, great guys, Sam Ernst and Jim Dunn, first came into that company, it was probably 2006 or 2007 or so. And they developed, and the company and them together sold a pilot to ABC, which was terrific. I loved it. It was called Thief River Falls. It was amazing, and I hope that it still gets made one day. But like so many other pilots, it didn't get made, and then it just kind of went the way of the dodo. But ABC liked the working relationship with the guys so much that they were like, bring us something else. And ABC at the time had made, a bunch of Stephen King miniseries, like The Stand and I think It and everything else, The Langoliers. Those had all been on ABC. I guess The Shining, a bunch more, Rose Red, everything. Goes on and on and on. Storm of the Century. I can keep going. But then, meanwhile, Pillar Segan had produced The Dead Zone, so they were like, you know what? Like, let's just do this again. Let's try to take a Stephen King series to ABC. They wound up acquiring the rights to the Stephen King book, The Colorado Kid, and then gave it really to Sam Ernst and Jim Dunn. And we're like, you guys, let's see what, if you can come up with a show here, then let's do it. And they did. So as you said, I was lucky enough. They trusted me. They needed someone to take their notes, and get them coffee when they were thirsty. So for a little while, it was just Sam and Jim in Sam's garage with a whiteboard and their iMac, trying to figure out, what the shape of a first episode would look like. And it was me there taking notes. And they kind of needed me. I was a little bit of like the Stephen King expert. At the time, had read literally everything Stephen King had ever written, and I'd certainly seen every Stephen King movie or TV show. And so I was kind of the Kingopedia. But it was a great experience for me, and the show wound up, of course, not going at ABC, but then Syfy acquired the rights to it, Syfy and Entertainment One studio. And then a couple years later, it got off the ground there. And it was great. And I was lucky enough, that all the guys knew what I didn't want to be an assistant my whole life, and sometimes when you're an assistant, you can roll up through a company, maybe move up to the junior executive ranks. If you're an assistant at, say, a network or a studio, you can become a manager or a director of something there. Or maybe if you're like I was at a production company, you can get promoted up there and just become a creative executive, and then all your job is at that point is just to try to read new material, bring it in, try to develop new material, stuff like that. Those were paths that I guess I could have taken, but my heart was set on writing. I was still working on my writing in my spare time, not as much as I should have been, frankly. But that was what I really wanted to do, and luckily for me, those guys knew it and they supported me. So when Haven got picked up, the handshake deal that had existed for a little while was that I should move on to work on Haven specifically. So I left. I quit my job with the company, gave up the insurance package, the benefits, and really any chance at having long-lasting employment, and moved to work on the show itself. So at that point, if the show were to get canceled, I would have been out of a job. But I was closer than ever to the brass ring. I guess it was what I wanted to do. So instead of sitting behind a desk and manning a phone and coordinating schedules and stuff, which was great, and I wouldn't trade my years as an executive assistant for anything. Then I moved on. I became what's called the writer's assistant on the show, which is an assistant but to the writing staff. And your job, details can vary from show to show, but you sit in the writer's room basically and do whatever they need you to. Usually you're taking copious amounts of room notes. You're basically just taking down every idea, every shred of anything that that the professional writers who have been hired kind of come up with, and just so that you have it for posterity, or so you can go back through, or and then a lot of it is ordering lunch and all that kind of stuff too. But what you're also really doing is you're an apprentice writer. You're sort of soaking up how it works, politically, creatively, like everything. And if you're really lucky and good people work for you, they kind of hold your hand and they kind of bring you along. I was also the script coordinator on Haven. This is back season 1 and season 2. That's another job on a TV show. And on some shows, smaller cable shows like ours, they combine that and the writer's assistant job. So as a script coordinator, your job is a little bit more than an assistant job. You're almost more in service of you're the liaison between production and the writers. Every piece of written material, script, a page, an outline, doesn't matter, comes from the writers or from the showrunner to you. You proofread it, process it, so make it that it looks okay, or it looks like everything else that's come out before, so it's all the same format. And then you're the sole person who distributes that to production, to the network, to the studio, to the producers, to the cast, to everybody. Sometimes it's going out to a couple hundred people. Sometimes it's going out to 4 or 5 people. But the material only ever comes from the script coordinator. There's sort of the hub. And you kind of need someone to be in charge of it, because once you start going through revisions to things and changes, there has to be one central source. If it's everywhere else, it's chaos. But so I was both of those jobs on Haven, and it was great. So I was working pretty long hours. It was 14-hour, 15-hour days. I was the first person in the office and the last person to leave, but I was the happiest I'd ever been. I was so close to the process and to the show and to what was going on that I loved it. I celebrated every day that I did that, and I didn't care how long the hours were. I didn't care if I was the one at the end of the day, late on a Friday night. I loaded up a bunch of scripts, and I was dropping hard copies of scripts off on the doorsteps of our network and studio executives, because it was too late at night for us to pay for the late rush messengers. It was a pleasure. It was a delight.
And it paid off for you, because season 2, you ended up writing an episode.
It did. I learned pretty early on when I came out here that to make it as a television writer, there's really sort of 2 good paths on which to go. You can either really just be a super talented writer, or even maybe you just kind of figured out some tricks and some skill, and you break in purely based on your material, that your stuff is good enough, you get read enough. Maybe you're a barista somewhere, maybe you're an ad executive, maybe this is your second career because you had been a journalist and you're switching over. Whatever it is, you just somehow get people to read your material, and they're like, you know what, you're like, I love this material, we're going to take a chance on you, we're going to give you a job. You can do that, or you can work your way up. And maybe it's, because I have sort of a blue-collar sort of mentality or whatever, but I felt like, I still feel like, like my writing was like pretty good, but can always be better. I feel like I'm constantly learning. Everything I read, everything I see, I feel like I picked up a little bit more. And I feel like that's a good way to be. But I never had the confidence that, like, I didn't think I was William Shakespeare, that I was going to be able to put out a piece of material that would light the world on fire. And even then, there's tons of really talented writers who just, bad luck, no break, couldn't get the right people to read it at the right time, whatever, and it didn't work out for them. But I was pretty convinced that I could outwork anybody, that I could earn a chance. And I knew that a really good method of advancement, particularly in the television world, is if you work for good people and you've sort of have proven yourself as a writer's assistant or script coordinator or both, and maybe they've given you a chance, to write like things here or there. Like I wrote stuff for Syfy.com, and I did some like web and digital stuff that we were doing at the time. And then, bit by bit, I was able to, begin to pitch some ideas in the room, and a couple things that kind of worked. There was a big twist in an episode in season 1 that I pitched, and it ended up sticking, and it was something I think that really worked in the episode. And you never really take credit for your ideas in the room. You shouldn't. It's the room's idea, and that's the way it should be. But I know that the guys who I worked for, felt like I was actually making a valuable contribution to the show creatively. So I got lucky. And sure enough, that sort of method of, I guess, quote unquote, advancement worked out for me. Because in the second season, I had my whole spiel worked out. I was going to come to them and pitch them. I was like, guys, I just want to try to write maybe a bit of an episode. Maybe I can co-write it with somebody, or I'll write just the story. But they came to me and they were like, we really want you to write an episode in the second season. And it was great. So I wound up writing, it was a Christmas episode, if you remember correctly, the second season. And it turned out well enough that I got promoted to the writing staff full on. So we hired someone else to have my old job as the script coordinator and writer's assistant, and I moved up to what is called a staff writer, which is the entry-level position on any writing staff. It's sort of, Writers Guild sort of mandated, but once I got that job, then now that I had that job offer and that I was going to get hired, then that allowed me to join the Writers Guild. That allowed me to get an agent, and it afforded me so many opportunities that I still have now. And I was super lucky. I had wound up on the right show for me. I worked for great people, and thankfully we had great fans like yourself, and the show stuck around. There was a lot of different times where it looked like it might get canceled, but we survived. We made it 6 years, which is crazy. And and I was fortunate enough, like you do on shows, like sometimes from season to season you can get promoted and kind of move up. And there's a pretty strict hierarchy of positions on television writing staff. So all those names you see on the bottom of the screen, sometimes in the first few cards over black at the end of an episode, those are all pretty kind of strict titles. There's staff writer, and then the next level up from that is story editor. The next level up from that is executive story editor, then co-producer, then producer, supervising producer, co-executive producer, then executive producer. And at any stop along the way, you can also be called a consulting producer if, for some reason, they couldn't give you whatever title that you should have, So but all those titles all are just sort of functions of seniority and hierarchy. And I was lucky. It's kind of like rungs in a ladder that I landed on a great show, great opportunity. I climbed a few rungs, and it's kind of left me where I am now.
I mean, you literally climbed from the bottom to the top. And so given that, I have 5 questions.
Sure.
I'm going to hit you with.
Please.
And let's get your answer and see if that can, I'm sure there are many people who are interested in writing. And so these 5 questions are kind of geared to not answer every question that you may have about writing, but maybe answer some of the burning questions people have, right? So do you feel from your experience, and again, you've gone from bottom to top, do you feel that they need to go to school to be a writer, or can you just go for it? Screenwriting contests, apply jobs here or there. Or do you think there was a benefit to doing a program like yours or AFI or the number of New York Film School programs that are out there?
I do think it helps, but I do not think it is a necessity. I think that, I would not have gotten the internship that I got if were not for the program that I came up through. But from that point on, where I went to school and that, opportunity, it hasn't mattered anymore. And for that matter, there's a lot of people out here who are pretty successful writers who came to it as a second career. In fact, there's sort of, I think, an adage is that they like you to have some life experience, and you bring in a perspective. You bring in, something else. You weren't just a career screenwriter. It's something that, I sort of sometimes wish that maybe I had done something else for a few years and then came back for it. But no, I do not think that you necessarily have to go to school. And I don't know that you necessarily have to take night extension courses or that sort of stuff too. Those things exist and they're great, but there's a lot of actually really good books out there. I wouldn't trust any one, but maybe as a totality, you kind of pick up a lot. There's a few really good podcasts that I could recommend. And there's a lot of ways to absorb it. There's also nowadays, thanks to the internet, there are so many scripts online. Just with a Google search, you could find hundreds of scripts from TV shows, particularly pilots, but also just episodes of a lot of shows over the last 10 or 15 years. You could find thousands of movie scripts, from awards consideration or everything else. They exist online. The PDFs are there. And reading scripts is the best education for screenwriting that you can have. Read 100 scripts, read 1,000 scripts. I firmly believe in that Malcolm Gladwell, 10,000 hours to become at anything makes you an expert. And I think that you can do no wrong from just reading scripts and just seeing what it's like. It's very specific sort of craft, and I think we all have a very innate story sense from having watched movies and TV shows and read books our whole life. It's just about trying to kind of deconstruct that and figure out sort of the nuts and bolts of that. It's a little mathematical sometimes. It's not always super creative or super sexy, but there's a way about it. I used to love, and I still do sometimes, I would watch an episode of a show that I really loved, and then I would rewatch it, but I would pause after every scene, and I would draw a grid, like a whiteboard, like you see, like that they do in writers' rooms, a grid with, a different column for every act, and every act is sort of broken up by a commercial break, and then a little line separating every scene, and I would just write down in brief what the scene was, and I would basically, by the end of the episode, I would have filled out an entire board. So I basically sort of reverse engineered the episode, and I was like, okay, so this is structurally what it looked like on a whiteboard. And then, that helped me sort of break down like what worked about it, where the twists came, the types of twists, like how often we checked in with these characters. Like there are ways to just do it on your own. And I think that does you certainly no worse and maybe not any better than having a degree in it too. Right? It just takes time and effort, and the tools exist. You just have to go track them down. So
then one of the things we talked about was if you're really into TV writing, you could probably survive Toronto, Vancouver, Chicago. You could probably, but ideally you may want to be in Hollywood. And, if you're relocating, especially, the cost of living in Hollywood may not be so, might be a little bit of a sticker shock.
Exorbitant is the word I would use. It's horrifying.
Yeah.
Which was tough. And I was lucky. I moved out here in 2004. And, the rent for the place I'm sure I lived in 2004 is probably twice as much now than it was then. There are ways of defraying the costs. I've had a roommate pretty much my entire life. And you don't have to live in downtown Los Angeles. You can commute. But there's really no getting around it. Like it is, because it's a competitive industry and because so much of it is relationship-based and being there in person, it's tough to break in and to have, that sort of steady job, particularly on a writing staff, unless you're here. That is a bit of a barrier on entry. It's the same as if you wanted to work in the fashion industry, you kind of just have to go to New York. And if you want to be on Broadway, you kind of have to go to New York. It's a little bit tough. It's
fair advice though, but it's so exorbitant. So kind of plan for that, guys. If you're trying to do it, it's a sacrifice, but well worth it for what you get in return when you put the work in.
It absolutely can be. And like those guys who created Haven, Sam Ernst and Jim Dunn, they, speaking of second careers, they owned restaurants. They had a restaurant empire in Minnesota and then decided to pack it up and come here and give screenwriting a try. They had just been doing it on their own for 10 years. And I think it was 15 years ago now, but they were in their mid to late 30s and came out here. And they were, 40 when they were, I think, an assistant out here, and then got a job as a staff writer a couple years later, and then wound up creating their own show. Like they were a little bit on the late end, but like it is not impossible.
But you guys can write your own story, and make it work.
But that being said, the Blacklist website and a bunch of other screenwriting contests out there, like they exist, and those do pan out sometimes. I'm a little wary of anything where you have to pay to apply or pay to submit or pay to have someone like read your script. I think those are often, sort of snake oil salesmen. They're not always, but they can be, so those things kind of worry me a little bit, but it's tough. There's the best, if you really want to give yourself the best shot, like it really does behoove you to be here and to know people, to make connections, to meet people. Like it's it's not unique to the entertainment industry. The only thing unique about the entertainment industry is that we all watch and read the same stuff.
Hey guys, Brian has provided some links that you can check out in the show notes page that could help.
Absolutely. The podcast I think I referred to earlier is there's a bunch of good ones out there. Script Notes is pretty well known. It's John August and Craig Mazin's screenwriting podcast. There's a great podcast called Children of Tendu, named for the Dishwalla song "Counting Blue Cars," actually, of all things. But it's a podcast from two writers who I know and love, Jose Molina and Javier Grillo-Marxuach, who have really long, wonderful resumes. Jose was actually on Haven its first year, and they are basically giving a free crash course online via podcast in TV writing. They go, topic by topic, behind the scenes, the nuts and bolts, the nitty-gritty, the highs and the lows, and the lower than the lows. But it's terrific. I love it. So many other TV writers I know, who maybe you don't learn a ton of quote unquote new stuff from listening to it because they kind of are walking you through some of the early steps, but it is still so informative. It's so funny, so heartfelt that I love it. I can't recommend it enough. So I recommend it to everybody. I could sell it on street corners. Children of Tendu is the name.
And there are a few others, guys, that you can check out. But Brian, before we get to the last section, I did want to ask, right? So some of your Haven counterparts, the other writers, right? You were there the entire season. Nick Parker, who also wrote on Haven, was there pretty much, I want to say season 3.
That's right. He came on board as the script coordinator and writer's assistant in season 3.
Right. And then there were some others and some writers who left the show and kind of went elsewhere. How does it work for writers? Are you on a yearly contract? Are you is there a set time? Just kind of give people an idea of how it works.
It's all negotiated, the length of your contract. For instance, when I became a staff writer, I signed a 3-year contract. So that took me out 3 more seasons of the show. And when you sign up, a deal like that, typically you kind of sign your rights away. I liken it a lot to a sports team. We're all aware of NBA and NFL free agency and contracts and that sort of stuff. It really works the same sort of way. You sign up with a show, you're really signing a contract with the studio that produces the show. A lot of times you wind up signing a first look deal with them, which means that even if you wanted to write something new or original on your own that wasn't an episode of that show, even if you had a new idea that you want to go pitch, you have to take it to them first. They get a first look. A lot of times they own your rights for a couple seasons of the show going forward. So they could either just, not pick up your option for another season and then you're free. Or you could, if you have a good relationship with them and you get an opportunity to move on to a different show, you can ask very nicely for them to let you out of your contract because you were in what's referred to as first position with them. There's a lot of people who have projects that they're in first position on, second position on, sometimes even third position on. But that all becomes really important because, if something goes forward and the writer, the creator, or actor, or director, or anybody is not in first position on the thing, it becomes a very scary proposition for whoever's investing millions and millions and millions of dollars on it because they might not have one of their principal talents. And that becomes that sort of negotiation is a huge deal. That's where agents come in. That's where agencies sort of make their bones. That's why it's really important, the sort of the deal structure. But it's very much like being sort of an athlete on a sports team, except instead you sit in a chair all day and just hold a pen instead of basketball.
And so for you now, having left Haven, and probably especially for Haven fans who may be listening, what are you up to now?
A bunch of different things. I left Haven not of my own free will. Haven ended last year, and so therefore there was just no job for me to come back to. I would have stayed on Haven as long as humanly possible, but it carried me very far. So I'm developing a few things. I've got a few irons in the fire with the company that produced Haven. A couple things of my own. Have taken a bunch of meetings, so it's a pretty good time. I was fortunate enough to have been on a show for a little while, so I didn't need to move on to something immediately. I may be soon, so nothing really nothing that I'm at liberty to discuss openly. because everything is sort of always a house of cards or built on sand. But I've got a few things in the works, so it's been an exciting time.
And is that kind of how the life of a writer is? When you don't have a job, you kind of have to keep moving, give yourself some options, don't bet on one thing? Very much,
because you're always trying to sell something or sell yourself, really, or both at once. So it's kind of incumbent upon you. It's the upside. It's why I like being a writer, and I feel sorry sometimes for actors or even directors. It is the barrier to entry for writers is not huge. You can, at any point in time, I can sit down and will myself to try to write something new or something else. But if you're an actor or director, it becomes a lot harder. You have to have some material to perform in or to do what you need to do in. So as ways into the entertainment industry, I still feel like writing is the best. But I may be biased.
Yeah, I mean, there's a chance. Yeah. There's a bias, but you also have experience on your side. So,
but for me, I was just really lucky that I had such a positive experience in Haven and dealing with people like yourself, like fans. I was a fan, and I am still a fan of so many other things. And really, like, I was able to articulate it when I was finally able to start writing episodes of the show. All told, I think I wound up writing or co-writing 9 episodes. And when you're on a staff, you end up, you contribute to everybody's episodes, and you kind of have, everyone helps everybody with everything. But for me, I felt really validated, because why I'd kind of wanted to get back into it a long time ago, to kind of bring it full circle, was the shows that I loved meant so much to me when I was growing up. When I had no friends, they were my best friends, and I just wanted to do something and work on stuff that meant that much to other people. Like, I kind of wanted to give back in a way. That's what I was sort of looking for. And we had that with Haven. We had the best fans, and as long as we didn't upset you guys too much, I think you were, at times, at least the relationship, was very reciprocal, and I felt like I had sort of achieved that, and that was a great feeling, and that's all really that I'm looking to do down the road too. Is I just kind of want to try to put out stuff that people feel about the way that I felt about my favorite things too.
Yeah, and you definitely provided that feeling for myself and for a number of fans. And you are definitely a fan favorite for Haven folks, because you answered the questions. You gave that behind-the-scenes look. Before we wrap up, one last question. What is one thing you would recommend to someone who's chasing their dream?
Wow. No matter what the dream is. The one thing that I would recommend, and this is sort of this would be the subject of my seminar if I were ever to give one, would be hard work. I really honestly believe that, especially nowadays, that there's a lot of people out there. I don't know whether it's just a wave of entitlement that has sort of taken over our society, or if it's just that people sort of are just used to instant gratification. Or maybe it's that we're all told that we can all do whatever we want, and so when that doesn't necessarily prove to be immediately true, everyone gets really frustrated. But there's a sense of that people just feel like, they're automatically good enough or automatically deserve to have whatever they want to have, whatever dream it is. They think they're just going to get it, and I believe that you can get it. But I believe that you have to work for it. And I think that you have to go get it. And the good news about that is that there are so many people out there who aren't willing to do that. And I really think, honestly, I think I'm living proof, and there are so many people who are, that I was just able to outwork enough other people and work hard enough to achieve my dream. And I think, I have to keep working at it now to stay there or to grow it. And I think that's true of anybody. I really think that it may sound like a cliche, but I really think that the hard work is undervalued nowadays, and that you may not be as good as somebody, you may not be as talented, as fast, as tall, as short, as sharp. It doesn't matter. You can outwork anybody, and I honestly believe that.
That's fantastic advice, guys. Go start working. There you
go.
That's all you gotta do.
There you go.
Brian, thank you so much for being on the show. Such a treat, and I love it. It was such a great episode, especially for number 50.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It was an honor to be here. honored to be number 50, and I hope I get to talk to you again soon.
Guys, I just have to say thank you once again to Brian Millikin for coming on the show and sharing his story of how he went from dreaming of becoming a writer to becoming a writer. And it was a wonderful journey that we got to hear. We heard some great advice. Brian and I were talking after the recording had stopped, and one of the things he wanted to share on the episode, which I'll share now, is people want to work with people who are nice. He wanted to let you know that. So not just work hard, but remember that people want to work with people who are nice. So the idea being, be nice, As you're chasing your dreams, don't be that person who's running over people, throwing others under the bus just so that they can get on top, okay? People see that, and it's not going to work for you as well as you think it will, okay? So kindness, gentleness, genuineness, that's what people want to do. People don't want to work with someone they can't trust. People want to work with people who are nice and honest. So do that as you chase your dreams, because that'll get you further than any other type of dream chase. All right. Now, the links that Brian has mentioned on the show, as well as a few others that he provided, can all be found on the website on the show notes page at chasingdreamshq.com/episode 50. So you don't know this, but fun fact, this is like take number 21 of recording this outtake, because I've been trying to find the perfect way to say thank you. And, I've flubbed it all the time. I say too many words. I ramble. So I'm going to try and keep this one short. Thank you for your support. Thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being you and allowing me to chase my dream of helping others chase theirs by supporting the show and being awesome and just being who you are. I hope to continue what this is. I hope we have 1,000 more episodes, because that means that there are going to be 1,000 more dream chasers that I'm going to be talking to. So you guys keep doing what you're doing. Listen to what Brian said. Work hard. Listen to what all the other dream chasers and my friends who were on the show have said, and just start. Do what it is you want to do. It doesn't have to be a full-time thing. Take small steps. Big things will happen. You'll be surprised. Just do that, okay? So that's it. I'm not going to start naming people because I'll get in trouble, and then it'll be take 22 or something like that. So thank you once again for everything. I hope we will continue to serve you and be a resource for you. And if we can help you, let us know. And until next time, guys, keep chasing. Nailed it.
Thank you so much for listening to Chasing Dreams. Aimee would love to connect with you and hear all about your pursuit of chasing your dreams. Connect with her on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram via @ChasingDreamsHQ. Or you can find Aimee on Twitter @AimeeJ21. That's AIMEEJ21. Be sure to visit headquarters over at ChasingDreamsHQ.com for more inspiration, motivation, and resources to help with your own dream chase. We hope you'll join Aimee next week, and until then, keep chasing.